So it's been a while.
It has been. A good couple of weeks, 4 weeks,
yeah,
3 weeks.
More than that, 4 weeks, yeah. August off. I think we decided that the audience for podcasts was probably a bit lower during the August month. And we were in and out as well, doing our various holidays.
Well, the fan mail continues at a similar rate.
It does. It hasn't dropped off a bit. So what have you got up to in August?
Well,
What's new?
Bit cold water swimming. Got into that. So I can.
What, normal British seaside swimming, you mean?
No, I've started. There's a little squad of us. My wife calls it a synchronized swimming squad.
Well, that's kind of
so
with your waterproof lipstick on.
So yeah, but no, got into that. Finding it went for one this morning actually. 7 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, put me to shame.
I was in there, 15 degrees. As I was informed by another gentleman in the pool who just knew that it was 15 degrees. You could tell from the water temperature. But yeah, loving it.
Good. Well, I have picked up a newfound enthusiasm for learning languages, which I hated at school. And I'm sure lots of listeners will be familiar already, but the Duolingo app, which I've heard about for a long time but never bothered looking at, opened it up, and you can learn all sorts of languages.
It's fluent in Japanese now.
Yeah. The rest of this podcast will be conducted in High Valorian.
Well, it got me onto it this morning actually. Your enthusiasm for it spilt over, and I thought, well, I'm going to have a look at this. I really like the idea of being able to have a secret family language, which is why I started learning High Valorian this morning.
You're into lesson 1, you've learned that.
Yeah, so.
Excellent. Right, well, yeah, that's what August was all about. Back into it though.
Yep.
First podcast of the new academic year. Back to school, shiny new pencil case. Here we go. So hello again and welcome to the SME Growth podcast, the first of our new series starting in September for the new year after our break over August. So today we've got a slightly different subject. We're going to be talking about why it is that salespeople, who I'm told the world over hate CRM systems, happen to love the HubSpot CRM system. So I'm Dave Parry from Wellmeadow, and with me, as ever, in case you could have possibly forgotten, is Rich Buckle.
Hello.
So this is what we're going to talk about today.
Yep.
Why all those salespeople with me actually seem to like a CRM system for a change, rather than thinking that it's just a beast to feed with information and then get hit over the head with.
Yeah, and I guess we don't want to generalize here about salespeople and CRMs, but it does seem to be a bit of a theme, isn't it? I think if you're out, particularly I suppose if you're out in the field, or, I guess my wife did a lot of sales back in the day, and out in the field, you've got all sorts of stuff to do. Last thing you want to do when you're trying to get home, you've just been to an appointment, is sit there and wrestle with a database.
Update the CRM and make it all okay. Put your visit report in and type it all up. You're right.
Type your meeting notes up and all that.
I guess it's no different to lawyers not liking to do their timesheets. It's seen as being a bit of an overhead and admin and all that. Yeah. And I can see that. Certainly the way that a lot of CRMs are used by sales managers or managing directors, they tend to use it to beat salespeople up, saying you're not doing enough work, not enough activities.
And you want to make sure as well, don't you, that the information that's going into it is actually being used. There's no point just filling it with pointless information. And you think, well, hang on a minute, I've just spent 10, 15 minutes, a couple of times a day, every visit, putting in something, and who's using it? How's it being used? What are we doing with it?
Yeah, by the end of the year, you've probably written War and Peace with all your meeting notes and comments. And if no one ever reads it, pretty demoralizing.
But as we'll find out by the end of this podcast, it need not be that way.
Well, I must admit, the reason that I suggested this for today's topic is that I've had a couple of conversations recently in one of our clients where they've got a new member of the team, a new senior member, and they weren't familiar with HubSpot's CRM that we are helping to get them to get the best out of it. And in the space of 10, 15 minutes of just explaining some of the sort of sexier features that we use, eyes were on stalks, eyes wide open. Wow, that's amazing. And I've never seen that reaction from a salesperson about a CRM before. It's not normally something that salespeople are clamoring for. So it struck me that we are just taking for granted now some of the things that HubSpot does, or some of the plugins that we can use with it, that actually make it quite useful. So it's no longer just this big sort of shoebox you have to keep filling with bits of paper. You actually get some use out of it. It helps you do your job.
I think it's a case, isn't it? There's always, if you start with the mindset that there's probably a better way of doing this, and 99% of the time there is. And I think that's what we're seeing, isn't it? What we're kind of helping clients explore at the moment, to say there's a better way of doing your sales, managing your sales process. managing the tools you've got?
So I think we'll see how it goes, but we've got a bit of a list we put together that we thought we'd at least talk about. We might even split this into 2 episodes because there's quite a lot on there. Depends how much detail we get. See how much we waffle on.
Yeah.
See if you can keep me from waffling, and I'll keep you from waffling. And I had to think about what order did you put them in? Have I got my favourite one, or is there an absolute killer one out there? And there's certainly some further down the list that we're going to come to, which really have excited people. So stay listening to the end. Oh, how
shameless.
Cheesy is that? Jesus. But I thought the first one that I'd start with is some of the really basic stuff, which you'd like to think was common of lots of CRMs, but surprisingly isn't. And the one that I picked on to start with is the integration with your email client, whether that be Outlook or Gmail or whatever your favorite flavor is. And because I think most salespeople, like most of us in business, we spend a lot of our day inside Outlook or Gmail or whatever, managing your calendar, dealing with your emails and all of that. So if you can deal with lots of your CRM stuff in there as well, that saves it's not just the action of clicking a button and going over to your browser and looking up your HubSpot. It's the fact that it's in front of you. You can read it there while you're at it.
Yep.
You can even build up the contacts, clicking one button. You get an email from someone, they're not in your CRM. It says so on the screen. Click one button, they're now in your CRM.
Yeah.
And it even reads the content of the footer of their email to grab phone numbers, job titles. It saves you so much typing in. Almost to the point where I'd say that for a new installation, if you didn't have thousands of contacts, you could almost just start with a bare bones CRM, spend a couple of weeks clicking that button every time you get an email from someone new, and you're halfway there.
We've had people do that, haven't we? We've gone in and done that with the plugin. And there's other, I guess we'll get onto some of the other tools as well, but they're all integrated into the Outlook or the Gmail plugin, aren't they? So it's not just the fact that it's grabbing that contact information. There's other tools, other functionality that you can draw upon whilst you're doing your emails.
Imagine it's like having a kind of a web window inside your Outlook panel, and it's brought in some information from HubSpot. So it'll tell you what you know about the person. It'll give you a quick summary of the company, how many employees, what turnover, what's their postcode, what's the phone number, that type of thing. Any deals that you've got open with that contact at the moment that they're associated with, and you can go in and edit them, add new deals there. And then you get an email from someone saying, can you tell me about such and such? I'm interested. That's an opportunity. You want to log it. Just do it from within the email. Don't have to go and open up somewhere else and write anything in. Any service tickets, if you're using that functionality, any quotes you've sent them, all the stuff that you would expect to be in a CRM, visible right there while you're writing someone's email.
Yep.
That's quite good. And there's even some other bits in there I found to do with the meetings link, which we'll come on to, snippets and that sort of stuff.
There's tools.
Some neat HubSpot functionality right there.
There's a lot of power in it, isn't there? A lot of power in it.
And a lot of people, when they see that, that's almost straight away, oh my good, that's okay, I don't mind it now. I thought I was going to have to come out every time, or every time I've done an email or a phone call, go in and open up the CRM to write it down. It's so much easier to do.
It's there.
So that's the first one.
That's the first one. Plugin. So number 2, getting...
I feel like doing that music now on the top 10.
Building the tension as people wait to see what the top of the list is. So there's another thing, I suppose, that we're big fans of is the cookie identification, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think did you have something this week where someone was impressed, that story where someone was impressed about the cookie notification?
A bit too impressed, I think. That's right. That's right. It's good. Well, I had one a couple of weeks ago where I knew that I'd sent an email with some pricing information about what we could do to help. And it was some months before. And then a couple of weeks back, I got the notification pop up again that they'd opened the email again. And I thought, that's quite interesting. Then I saw they'd gone onto our webpage because it tells you that as well. So you got to be careful then of what do you do with that information, and don't do what I did. And I did it tongue in cheek because I knew the chap and I was sort of demonstrating that you got to be careful with this stuff. But I just dropped him a quick note saying, I see you've looked at our website again, and he immediately pinged it back, you spying on me, Big Brother and all that, which is, we had a joke about it, and that was the point of me doing it. But I think in general, you wouldn't do that. It's just too spooky for people. But it doesn't stop you logging their thought, just remembering, and then maybe the day after or a few hours later or whatever's appropriate for you in that relationship. But something that I often do when we're talking about what HubSpot is as a CRM, rather than just a database of people and deals and stuff like that, is that it's got this uncanny knack of being able to identify what were previously anonymous cookies. Yep. So whenever we go anywhere on the web, we drop a cookie inadvertently and it's anonymous. It's just used for analysis purposes. But there's a few ways, as we've talked about in previous podcasts, that HubSpot can identify you as being that person. And then all of your previous web visit on that site is identifiable.
Yeah.
So the one you're talking about there as well, it's earlier in the week, I was showing it to somebody, sent them an automated email, they clicked on the link, went to their own website, and they could see that visit come up. But then it had a week's worth of whatever of traffic beforehand automatically appeared. And they say, how can I have known that? I've only just identified myself on the website.
Yeah.
And that's because the cookie was there all along. HubSpot just didn't know who it was. And you've suddenly given that cookie a name. So anything you can do to get people by organizing a meeting with them, sending them an email, getting them to fill a form in on the website, suddenly all their web visit activity.
And that can be really useful as well, can't it? I was doing something with somebody this week and you could see that they'd looked at a particular product and then which was what the campaign was driving. And then they'd gone and looked at this other product and then they'd looked at some other product and they come back to the original product. And you can kind of see you're getting a feel then, you're getting insights into what people are doing. And like you say, you also then get those web notifications when, okay, a client's on the website now.
Yeah, and on the phone, if you've got the app, the phone pings with a HubSpot app notification. Fred Blogs has just gone onto your pricing page. You've got to decide then what you do with that information. But powerful stuff. And a lot of salespeople think that hadn't been possible up until now.
Yeah.
And here it is. So that's good. The meeting function I mentioned earlier, because you can access that from within the Outlook plugin, that I found a new feature on that. I think it's a recent release this week only on how to use that even better. But the gist of it, for those not aware of it, is you connect your Outlook or Gmail calendar up to HubSpot so it knows when you're free. And if you're trying to get somebody to agree a time to a phone call or a Zoom meeting or face-to-face, you can send them a link which gives them access to a page which is, it looks a bit like a HubSpot page, but it's not branded unless you're on the free version. And it shows all the available times that you've got. It doesn't say what you're doing, clearly. It's just a free/available view. And if they click on one of the times, they can book a meeting with you there and then. And if you've further integrated Zoom or Teams into it, which we've done, then not only does it book a meeting in your diary, it also sets up the Zoom or Teams meeting as well and accepts you into it and them into it.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. So you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And I can imagine for some people, they could almost run their whole future diary booking with anybody, assuming you've got a web page that attracts people who are interested. And it just books people in your diary.
And I'm quite liking as well a bit of customization around your calendar. So you can set up different meetings as well. So you might have a generic meeting. So I think the bottom of our emails have got somewhere you can book a meeting and you can pick a slot that's maybe 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, but we've got specific campaigns set up around, say, content creation, for example, and you can book a half-hour discovery call. Well, I only want that to be half an hour. So I've got a different calendar set up for that. And that's then got the messaging around that particular meeting. So if, for example, if you were running a particular campaign, another example from this week for somebody, and all the emails that go out to book the meeting are around that particular campaign. So the person getting that is reinforcing that, okay, this is the kind of experience and I know what I'm getting type of thing. So there's quite a lot of flexibility. Yeah.
And the bit that I just mentioned there that I found that's new to me this week anyway, I'm not sure if it's been there all along, is that you don't have to just give free access to your whole calendar and let people choose anything. The problem I was finding with that before is that I have a blend of face-to-face meetings on the road. I have to drive to clients and some of them are in the office on screen or phone calls. And you have to make sure that every face-to-face meeting, you've buffered it with some travel time. Either side in your calendar. Otherwise, someone might go and book a meeting while you're on the way to a client. So what I found with this new feature is that instead of just giving somebody a link to your entire calendar and letting them choose a slot, you can propose slots. And when you click that button, it opens up your calendar for you. You just tick a couple of the slots that you want to suggest to them, and it includes it in the body of the email with a link saying, if you want to meet 10 o'clock Friday, click this button. If you want to meet 3 o'clock on Monday, click that button, which will appeal to the salespeople that have been trained in the concept of the alternative option close or whatever it's called. When you're asking someone for a meeting, is it Tuesday better or Wednesday? And so you just give them the times and they can select it straight away. So it stops then them having free reign, trampling all over your calendar, but that may suit some people. So that's good. So I think even those few things there, they're native HubSpot features available even on some of the lower starter versions, aren't they? So the Outlook plugin integration, the fact that it tracks traffic on your website and tells you who it was, and this meeting tool, straight away salespeople see that as a hell of a step up in functionality compared to maybe what they've been used to before, which is just a CRM that gathers information.
Our listeners are thinking, with this much value, with only 3 points in, what possibly could be number 10 on the list?
I know. Well, we're halfway through this week's episode, and we've still got the good stuff to come. Oh, you tease. Go on then. Let's talk about. I want to cover one off, which I'm not really too sure how I feel about this. Really, the prospecting tool.
Yeah.
Now you've been into this a bit more than I have. It struck me as a bit like other.
Yeah. So there's other ones out there like lead forensics and things that people often compare it to. I mean, it's
which I hear nothing. I've never heard a good thing about the lead forensic salespeople. And if there's any of them listening, I apologize because I've never spoken to any of you, and I'm sure you're lovely, lovely people. But they're clearly trained to be very dogged, if I put it politely, rather than, they're really on the case, and they really do push for the close. So anyway, people generally say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of.
What does lead forensics do?
Well, it allows you to sort of see what who's been on your website, doesn't it? Who's.
Well, that's how they purport it to be, obviously. But it's not the same as we've just been talking about, is it? With the cookie thing.
No. So I mean, the way that HubSpot prospects work, I mean, to be fair, you've got to be able to find it in the first place.
Yes, it's a hidden feature.
It is a bit of a hidden feature, and I do think it's something. I saw something the other day where they're looking to develop it, but it will give you an indication as to who's been on your website. We've seen this quite useful in other places where people are maybe targeting certain companies. So if you've got target accounts, you're aiming some kind of content at a particular company, and depending on how they've got their domain set up, you may then be able to see, okay, somebody from brand ABC came on our website.
Tends to work for the bigger companies. Where they've got their own servers and all that sort of thing.
You can see where they've come from. You can see how many times they've come on your page, where they've visited, what's actually driven them there. So is it a Google search, a LinkedIn post, etc. But
it doesn't work for those companies that have just got their broadband through, BT or PlusNet or whatever. That's all anonymous. Yeah. It's if they're coming in from Canon or Tesco or BP, then
But it's still worth a look, and I think we've done some work with clients to say, well, it's worth keeping an eye on this. These are companies, have we been contacted by them? I mean, we spent ages with one client trying to figure out, we're trying to get a particular, if you've got a big multinational that you're trying to work with, that's got multiple offices around the world, like just trying to figure out who it's going to be is an impossible task. It's needle and haystack type of thing. Yeah. But at least you're getting some indication that somebody from that company is coming on your website. So, that can
you just don't know who.
You don't know who, but it can lead to a series of other kind of, interesting. You can do things then with HubSpot website, and we're not talking about marketing and things, but if a certain domain is present, show this content. Yeah. So you could try and lure people in. We started trying to do that, show a form when this particular domain is present, and you're just trying to tempt them into the ecosystem. But
so it's useful, as you say, it's well hidden, but when you find it, you can see you've got to filter out all the ISP type traffic that isn't interesting, internet service provider people. But other than that, it's there. Yeah. And if people are, what I found actually, the most beneficial thing from the point of view of helping people migrate and sell this idea internally to their teams is if they're already paying for lead forensics. Exactly. It is not cheap. And you can almost get the entire HubSpot Pro for the marketing for the same price you're paying for lead forensics alone. So it's a good way of saying, well, if we did that instead, it's half paid for. Yeah. Good.
Do you want to talk about just some of the contact setup, custom properties?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. This is where you open up the HubSpot screen and you can actually see the details on either a contact or a company. And the point is that in HubSpot it's very customizable, but at two levels. So either the admin can set it up so that everybody sees a particularly customized screen for that company, which is great, a default view that you've decided because you've put in your own custom properties that you want to show up and you don't want some of the standard ones. That's fine. But also each individual can change their view. Yeah. Or you can have a team-based view. So marketing people see one thing, sales people see another thing, IT people maybe see another thing. So that's quite handy.
And one of the things we've been playing with recently is conditional views as well. So you can actually set it. So let's say you've got a sales team that's selling different products. Maybe you've got a form that customers fill in around a particular product. All of that information can go to the salespeople who are dealing with that particular product sector lead. Not everybody has to see that information. So you can actually make that information conditional, because the last thing you want to do is overload everybody with information that maybe 50% of them don't need. 10% of them don't need, whatever that number is. So you can actually tailor who's getting this particular content and when it displays, those sorts of things. So
that's quite neat. I think especially when there's a lot of information that you could collect, you don't want your screen cluttered with loads of things. And like you said earlier, if people are busy, they're out on the road, they just want to go quick bang, collect the stuff, and you don't want too much clutter. And an adjunct to that would be, you mentioned earlier the idea of being out on the road and you've just done a visit. The app is getting better at being able to quickly track notes while you're on the road just on your phone.
Yeah.
It's a bit better if you've got an iPad, but the phone's not bad as well. They've just been able to collect stuff. So things like custom views on the desktop bring that sort of functionality into the desktop browser. So that's good. Should we pick one more for first episode? Maybe see if we can squeeze two in then.
Squeeze two in.
The bit I was talking about to someone the other day is all salespeople are overloaded because there's so much that you could do. You could chase up a quote you sent last week. You could prospect call someone you'd never spoken to before that you just found out who they exist, they may be. It could be a lapsed customer that you've just had a notification of that maybe 6 months ago they last ordered, or the last time you spoke to them. You might have to call them again. It might be a key account that you like to check in with every couple of weeks, every month. All of these different types of activity all stack up. And by the time you've got a few accounts you're looking after and a region with a lot of prospects, it just becomes too much. And you end up with hundreds of them and they're all falling over each other.
Yeah.
So I'm interested at how lots of different salespeople prioritize that. How do they manage their tasks? Do they use Outlook's to-do? Do they have a manual to-do list? Do they use Trello board? What is it they do? And the HubSpot Task Manager, for me, works perfectly for that because of some of the neat integrations it has with the rest of its features. So you can set priorities, not surprisingly, for different tasks, set due dates and give a bit of commentary. But the neat thing is if you say that the task is to email someone, or it's to call someone, or it's to just to do something, then the way the task manager reacts is different depending on what the task is.
Yeah.
So if it's just to do something, it'll pop it up and remind you to do it. If it's to send an email, it'll open up an email browser writing window, already half populated what you need, and you just bash in the thing, click send, and it's off. It's already pre-populated with who it's going to, it's logged it against all the right people, and it logs the fact that the email's been sent to that deal or contact as well. So that's pretty neat. But if you said you wanted to give a phone call to somebody, it fires up the browser window that drives the phone calls. And while you've got your headset on that you may be using for your Teams calls, you just make the call through the browser.
Amazing.
Which you can then record.
Yeah.
And then you can transcribe. Yeah. And it certainly logs that you've done it. You just put a couple of words in to say, this is what I thought the call. So it's brilliant, that whole task management thing. And for the pro users who've got a sales seat, you can organize your tasks into a bit of a list. And then you hit the button and you just click next. And as soon as you've done it, it fires up the next window. So there's no gap. If you just want to spend a couple of hours blitzing your to-dos, you just keep splitting that button. Do this one, make the call, write the email. You can get through a hell of a lot of tasks in a short period of time. It's just making it easy for you. Amazing. So I like that. That works well. I use it myself. Go on, let's talk about quotes and document tracking and all that, because that's another one of these ones that's a bit spooky but pretty helpful.
Yeah, I like using the document tracking. So if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a way of, instead of just attaching your quote or proposal to an email, firing it off, not knowing what's going on, if you use document tracking, you're able to actually get some quite granular insights into what people are looking at. So you effectively upload your document into HubSpot, say it's a proposal, and you generate a link for that, and you send that link to the prospect or the client or whomever. And oftentimes I find that with a lot of modern presentations, they can actually be quite big. If you've got a lot of imagery in your proposal or anything, it's actually easier to send a link than it is to send the document. But anyway, what this will do is it will then allow you to see who has looked at what within the proposal. So you might find, so I'll give you a good example of this. We sent a website proposal out to somebody a while back, and the marketing manager looked at it, and I could see what she'd looked at. So very much on the kind of what's it going to look like, how's it going to, what's the functionality going to be in it, all those types of things. And you can see how long everyone spent on those pages. So probably 90% of her time was spent on that. The same document then got sent to one of the directors, and you can see almost immediately he went to the pricing page and spent most of the time on that. So you start to get, and that's maybe an obvious example. That's if you had to, place a bet on that, that's probably where you would go. But it is still interesting to see who's looked at things. I've had it when I've gone into a meeting before where I've sent someone a document and they say, oh, I've read your proposal, and I know they've actually only spent 60 seconds looking at it. So it's just another one of those things. You're getting those insights, you're getting those incremental gains, as it were.
Even if you just find out when they've gone in it at all, that extra bit about how many seconds on each page is rich information. But the fact they've opened it, that can trigger you to say, right, now it's okay now for me to follow up and ask them, have you read the proposal yet? You don't have to let on that
I think it's another good way of getting a cookie labeled as well, because if someone sent me a proposal and I forwarded it on to you to say, can you have a look at this? You've got to put your email address in to actually have a look.
To be allowed to see it.
And you're going to want to do that to be able to see it. So you can circumvent all this by just downloading the document. But, if you don't, then you get all this extra information. So
that's good. And in terms of quotes, which is kind of an allied but different bit. So documents could be anything. It could be a company presentation. It could be a data sheet, whatever it could be. Whereas quotes are clearly a more a commercial offer, inviting someone to accept. So that's quite important. And HubSpot does have a quoting feature, which is okay. I don't think most people will say it's not the best ever. It's not that customizable, but if you need it to send out quotes based on the deal information you put in, it can do it. And you can even get it to capture an approval or something. You can't get payment in the UK. That's a US only thing.
No, but you can have signatures, sign contracts, things like that.
Right, good.
I think it works. It could work really well if you've got quite a simple product list. So you could upload your product list, bring it into the quote, quite simple. I think where it starts to get a little bit, it starts to hit the buffers where you've got a bit more of a maybe technical element to your proposals. You need a bit more detail in it. And it's just how it formats.
You're not just listing what you're doing. You need to talk a bit about each one, the background to it and how this solves your problem.
Maybe there's an image or something that needs to go in, that type of thing.
Okay.
But that's not to say there are some really good integrations for quotes into HubSpot. Recently, we've been doing quite a bit of work with Qwilr, which is a HubSpot integration quote template that allows you to put all sorts of stuff in: video, payment, breakdown of the product list, details,
and the
background.
difference there, I really quite like this. You introduced me to this, and it took me a while to sort of realize why it was so much better than the others, if you like, because it's not producing a PDF, it's going to a web page. But rather than just doing what a PDF could do, but in a web page, which I've seen other apps do, like you say, you can embed a video or have something like that. But you can also have a lot of concertina type content. So you can include your entire terms and conditions, but just as a one line, you click the button and it expands it and collapses it. That's useful. And getting people to approve it, maybe multiple signatures, that type of thing. That's all built-in functionality. So that's pretty good. And the way you design it, it's in modules or in blocks. And a bit like you just talked about there, tracking how many seconds different people looked at different pages of a PDF, it will tell you how many seconds that module was in view on the screen. So even though it's presented as just a long form HTML, web page type content that you can read all the way down, it knows how far down you are and it's logging. It's always got a timer, like a chess clock, starting and stopping when you're on each bit. So it's doing the similar sort of thing as that is.
And again, with that, you can download it as a PDF if you need to, isn't it? So not everybody wants a web app, but I think as things move forward, that will become more ubiquitous in terms of using it. And I think as well, we are in an age where the visual element of this stuff is important. Everybody's been conditioned by, Apple apps or Netflix or whatever. Just the interface of so much of what we use nowadays is very slick just in our day-to-day life. So by using something that's very visual, but at the same time is integrated into all of the HubSpot back end, just gives you a powerful...
The beauty of that is you set that template up first, and that's done offline, and maybe you get help to do that. Someone internally in marketing might better help the sales guys to do that. And it can bring in all sorts of information from your HubSpot record, either on the deal or the contact or the company. So you can really quite tailor that, what is still a template.
Yeah.
And so you come out of your meeting, you're still in the car on your iPad or on your phone almost, you can do it with a small screen, fire up that, make sure all the right things are copied across, click the send button, and it's off.
Yep.
So pretty useful. So it's just really making that, taking out all the overhead time that when you need to just now get a quote and you've already got all the information in there, you don't want to go and write it all again. It automates that for you.
Supercharging your sales efforts.
Can you go one for a slogan? Get you an advertising.
Exactly. I miss my calling.
Yeah. Good. Okay, let's call it a day there, because that's a good sort of half-hour summary of the first ones. The ones we haven't covered, which we'll put into a second episode, then we'll talk about something around the automated sending of emails. That's pretty neat. And also canned text and how you can quickly write emails even when they're sort of made up of lots of different bits and bobs. So that's pretty useful. Some of the automation available within HubSpot, not used for the marketing sense only, but also for the sales thing and anything. Yep. We'll give you some examples of where we found some pretty decent automation to help salespeople do what they do. An introduction to analyzing what works and what doesn't, and how we collect the right sort of information to give us the best chance of doing that. And we talked a bit about calls. We'll go and cover that again. And then we'll finish up with some of the third-party plugins that we found very good. And these are the ones that people do almost say, wow, when you talk to people about, sort of stuff you can do. Especially useful for organizations where you're selling into a large company, bigger account with many stakeholders, and some of those sort of things you can do. Or if you're on the road quite a bit.
Yep.
And then finally, we'll finish up with a neat tool for basically stopping having to write any visit reports ever again, which most salespeople like the idea of that.
And some integrated dashboards as a bonus.
And talk about bonus content, but integrated dashboards. Okay, so we'll do all that next week. Yep.
Very good.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much again for listening through a whole episode of the SME Growth podcast, where this week we were talking a bit about how salespeople really do come to appreciate HubSpot's version of CRM, whereas perhaps they've got a bit of a jaundiced view about others that they've come across before. And that's just part one. So we'll come back next week for part two and go through those other subjects. As ever, we ask you to tell your colleagues, and especially if you've got any colleagues in sales that you think might be interested in this, then please pass on our link to this particular episode. And if you're in Spotify or Apple or whatever, then follow us and click the bell so you get told when our next episode drops. Have a good weekend, and in the meantime, good luck with your businesses.